Welcome to the second part of our Tibet vlog. So we spent the first night in Lhasa acclimatizing to the altitude before we met up with our tour group and tour guide next morning to head off to Drepung Monastery. So if you're a foreigner visiting Tibet, you definitely need to sign up with a tour agency and a guide, which means that your itinerary, like ours in Tibet, is actually pretty restricted to what's available on the existing itineraries that they provide. So Drepung Monastery is in, I guess, almost every itinerary that there is, but don't worry, it's a really peaceful, beautiful monastery that's located right on top of a mountain or a hill. So there's a lot of stair climbing, but at the same time the views are really amazing. You get to see the snow-capped mountains from the monastery itself, and there's also this overall, I would say, feeling of quietness and calmness that I guess you can only get with being so high up and so far away from the city itself. So that's for Drepung Monastery. And another very important monastery that we visited in Lhasa would be the Sera Monastery, where we got to observe this really interesting, I would say, item or experience called the monks' debate, which is where the monks gather in the courtyard of the debate hall and they have these very animated and very engaging discussions on topics that they've learned about in their studies of Buddhism. And also, if you're looking to get little knickknacks or novelty items from Tibet, there is a whole little street market outside Sera Monastery selling all of those things. So be sure to pay a visit if you happen to be in the area and you're looking for something like that. On the third day of our trip and our last day in Lhasa, we visited the Potala Palace, which is one of the city's most famous landmarks, and that explains why there are so many tourists. It was just being like squished by tourists up and down, especially when the staircases in the palace itself are really old and rickety. So I would say go there with a steady set of feet and a really good sense of balance. But that aside, the palace itself, it's really something that's out of this world. It has so many years of history, so many years of culture, and it was just a really humbling moment to see how all that has been passed down throughout the years and how the Tibetans have always been so fiercely, I would say, protective and so fiercely proud of the culture that they have over there. So the next day we started our journey to Shigatse, which is where we will be staying for one night before we continue on our journey to Mt Everest Base Camp. In Shigatse we got to visit the Tashilhunpo Monastery and also stock up on all our snacks and drinks for the road trip the very next day, which was a really long 8-hour drive on bumpy roads. But that said, the drive itself is amazing, the views are spectacular, and I don't think there will ever be another opportunity in my life for me to be in a moving bus, to look out of the window and just see the Himalayas right there, sparkling under the sun, a full range of snow-capped mountains. It's really an indescribable experience, and I think that view itself kind of took off a lot of the thoughts that we were having about, the ride being so long and so on. It really made the journey, I guess, unforgettable in that sense. And so 8 hours later, we arrived at the Everest Tourist Base Camp, and it's a tourist edition because we were actually not allowed to join the Adventurous Base Camp because you do need an actual permit, and that's reserved for the people who do have the intention to ascend Mount Everest itself. We stayed for one night at Everest Base Camp, and I think this is definitely 100% core memory material. I don't really know how to describe the experience. There seems to be no word in the English language that's powerful enough to describe how it feels like to be able to walk out of your accommodation, walk down this road here, and just have the world's tallest mountain right there in your field of sight. You just want to stand at the side of the road and look at it and admire it and wonder how is it that nature is so beautiful and powerful and humbling at the same time. So we stayed for a night there, and the accommodations were actually not too bad. We had proper beds, we had like flushing toilets and everything. And as we drove down the mountain the next day, we also got to catch these random sheep at the side of the road, and we did a little stop at the 99 bends, which is this really curvy road that you have to take to get up to the tourist base camp. So yet another beautiful opportunity for photos and to get one last look at the Himalayas before we left the area completely. The rest of our trip passed by in this flurry of driving as we tried to make it back to Shigatse and Lhasa in time, but we did stop at quite a few interesting places like the Similar Pass, where the wind was so strong I thought I was gonna get blown off the mountain, as well as Yemdrok Lake, which is also another one of those core memory places. I don't think I'll ever forget how blue the water in this lake was, and also how everything in this picture seemed to fit all together. The waters of the lake, the mountains in the background, and even that really random cow that's just strolling around the lake. All these feel so out of this world, and it was so hard to believe that this is actually a real place that I was actually standing at right at that point in time. We also saw these yaks with their owners that were there for photo opportunities, which is also a really fun thing that you could do if you happen to be visiting the area. And that's all that we have for the Tibet trip that we had. We moved on to Chongqing the next day and stopped for a little while before we went back to Singapore. So do follow us for more of our travel adventures and let us know in the comment section if you do have any questions about our trip or how we plan it or how we made it happen. See you next time. Bye.